Hello everybody, welcome back. This is video number 3 of the video series that we are doing to test and explore the middleware for DevOps management. Alright, first things first, like I always do, before we start, I'm going to set the expectations for the video. So in this video, we are going to make some initial commits to our database, which will create a user, the very first user on our database. And using the credentials of that created user, we are going to generate the access token. Now, this access token will be used to read or write to the database. However, that is not something we will do in this video, but we'll do till the part where we generate the access token after creating our very first user. All right, to get started, let me quickly jump into my editor, which is right here. And as you can see, my middleware service is already running and is connected to a database. All right, let me also increase the font. That should be better. To get started, I also recommend you to install a REST client such as Postman. I'll show you the one I'm using here. This will help you test the REST APIs for DOMGMT, uh, the middleware that we are trying to explore and test. So if you don't have one, I would highly suggest you install, or else you can also install plugins for your browser. For example, you get a REST client plugin for Firefox. What I'm doing is I'm using a plugin for VS Code, which is my editor. I'll quickly show you that. So if I search for REST, and this is the plugin that I'm using. Now I'm using this because this helps me uh, send HTTP request from within my editor, and this also helps me create .http files, which I can save and then push it back to the repository to make it available to you guys. So I'll show you those files. If you see this directory here called sample requests, you'll see a number of files with .http extension. These are the files that I can save with the requests and send it back to the repository so that you can see them. All right, with that, now let us begin. So like I said, we are going to create the very first user on a database so that we can generate the security tokens, right? And to create the very first user in database, you would typically usually commit the changes directly into the database in a real world scenario. But what I've done is I've created a workaround for you guys so that it is easier for you. And I've done this because I understand you yet don't know the properties the user should have, or the fields that the user object should have to persist in the database. So I've created a few routes that you can call and create the very first user. So within the API folder, if you are in your project directory and it is open on your editor, go to the response folder. Within the response folder, you'll find something called as services.js. So it's a JS file called services.js where you would see a lot of code commented out starting from line number 113, uh, or it could be some other line if I've made any changes, but if you see, it would start it, the comments would start from a route called all users right here. Let me also minimize this and increase the font a little more. Okay, that should be better. So what you need to do is starting from line number 13 all the way down till line number 218, uncomment the code and then save the file. Now this will open all the routes to create your very first user. Now if I scroll down further, you would see on line number 156 there's something called as a create user, route.post create user. This is the route that we are going to use to create user. Now, if you're using a REST client application, something like Postman, I'll show you how to do it on that as well, but I will be using the REST client plugin for my editor. So this is how the Postman application looks, where in the URI tab right here, you will need to enter this address, which is localhost port 5000 forward slash API forward slash this should be not v1, sorry, and then services and create user. This is the route that you would need to enter here, and in here the drop down section you would see the method type. So you have get, post, put, patch, delete. These are the only ones that we would be using in our project, and the other ones are rarely used, so we don't even need them. But to create the user, you need to send a post request. So make sure you have post selected here, and then click on the body tab right here. In the body tab, you need to click on the raw button. So you have radio buttons here, none, you have form data, then you have xwww form URL encoded, and you also have raw. You click on raw and make sure that in this drop down right here you have selected JSON. Once you do that, you would need to pass a JSON object to this body. So this would be init pwd, p in uppercase. Remember, the keys in the object, the JSON object, are case sensitive. So it's init p in uppercase, then wt stands for initial password. That's how I abbreviated it for. Anyway, so this would be the key, and the value would be whatever initial password you want to give to your user. I just use the word random, so I'll keep it as it is. And once you've done that, you need to click on send. Now I'm not doing it here because I want to do it using my editor, so I will go to my sample requests, and then I'll go to first user, and here I've made a similar request. So it's a post request with the URI that I want to hit, and also the request body is a JSON object with the key value pair, init password and random. Now once I hit on send request, they should create a user. So let us do that, and I get HTTP 201 created, which means my user was created. So if I scroll down, let me also minimize this. Yeah, this should be better. So if I scroll down, you would see the result here. Now you would see a similar result on the REST client application that you're using, which is Postman, where you would get a middle name, which is Kumar. Now, you might be wondering from where did these fields get populated. So I've hard coded these fields in the routes that we just opened by uncommenting the code, so that you don't have to type in the whole um, or you don't have to type in all the fields, required fields, to create a user. You just uh, have to type in the password, which is init password that we passed as a JSON object in the body right here. Typically, if you are creating a user, you would require a lot more field. For example, you will require something like this. So you will require a middle name, and then a middle name for the user, that could be anything, and you would also require a first name, and say could be John, and then you would require a last name, and let's say that is so last name. And there are many other fields, we'll see those fields now in the response body, but for now I've hard coded them. As I said, I just wanted to make it easier for you guys. So if I go to services.js and let me minimize this for some time, and I scroll down, oops, um, yeah, so if I scroll down, this is the route that we had hit, create user, and here you would see the values hard coded. User ID is USR0. Now, why is it USR0? That's something I would explain you, or you would discover when we start creating counters on the database. First name was hard coded. If you really don't like the name, you can always change it. The middle name, last name, phone number. Now these are all required fields. Email, group. Okay. Now a group is required to identify the type of user, whether it's an internal user, or it group could also be something like this, a customer. You can categorize your users based on the group, or you can also categorize them based on the roles. So for example, you can have a group of developers, so I can say developer, or you can have say uh, admin. But these kind of phrases are more to do with the role of the user, and the role of the user is important because this will help us provide authorization. So for example, an admin might have read write access to all the routes, or make CRUD operations to whatever route is there. Whereas maybe if the role is a developer, then a developer might not have the authorization to create a new project request. Maybe a project manager would have authorization to create a new project request. So that is why roles are important. For now, I'll give it as admin, and group, I'll keep it as internal, just to signify that the created user belongs to the organization. We're just mocking a user, right? And then we have status. Now there are two types of status. One is active and not active. Why have I kept this field is something that we will see when we create other users, and when we try to delete a user. Now, security, this is an array of objects. For now, I've kept it blank. Security usually will hold the security questions of the user. Remember in the first video, I told how a user can reset the password using security questions. So this is the field that will hold the security questions for the user. For now, we'll leave it blank, really not required. Gender, male, female, anything that you want. And then the bio. Uh, the bio could be really anything. It's left up to you. For now, what I've given is lang, which is language, locale, and a region. You can add whatever you want here. Then created by, this is a mandatory field. For now, I've hard coded this as Superman. That's the only name I could think of at the time. And then you have created on, this would be auto generated, a UTC string from date, and a display picture. Now a display picture is again an array where you have two elements in the array. The first one would be the file name, and second would be the base64 string of the image that the user is trying to upload. And now this is also something to do with filed upload function, which we'll discover when we start creating new project request epics and so on. Now also, if you want to see the model of the user from where we are validating all these fields are, if you go to file called user model.js. Now this user model.js would be within the model folder. Let me do this. Let me also go up. Now if you see here, in the project directory within the API folder, you have a model folder, and within the model folder you have a file called user model.js. Right, now if I increase the font again, now in the user model .js file, you would find all the fields defined for the user. So you've got ID, which is of course auto-generated by a package called Mongoose. You have first name, required type is true, which means it is a mandatory field. Middle name, uh, default is NA. Now if the user does not provide anything, you can keep it as NA, or if you want, you can just keep it as blank. Really depends on you what you want to do with it. Last name, again, it's a required field. You have phone. Now phone also has some validators that we define right away when we define the user model. So if you see here, it's type string, and now you can also have a number here, but I've kept it as string because sometimes the user would want to enter the area code with a plus sign, and that is when the string type is very handy. But if you really don't want the user to do that, you can just change it to number type. Now index true makes sure that this field is cached within the database, and the search is faster when you are searching for this particular model, which is the user model on database. Unique true, of course we want the numbers to be unique. Dropped up true. Now what this does is, if there are any other users created with the same phone number, it will just drop the record. And of course, required is true. We do require a phone number for the user. All right, similarly we have email. It should be unique, so I've put unique true, and then we have required true, dropped ups true, index true. So we want email also to be a quick search. Group, like I said, it's type string. Required true, it's definitely required. And then there's something called as enum here. Now what enum does is it makes sure that when we are creating the user, the group is either of these values, the one that you see within the array highlighted. So it could be a customer, it could be internal, or it could be vendor. Now like I said, in the group field I don't want to have something like admin, developer, project manager. Those are just roles, right? For group we can just categorize the user using customer, internal, or vendor. Or if you have anything else in your mind, you can do that. Then the user ID, of course, this is a type string. It is a unique value. It is required. Drops to, and this user ID will be auto-generated. How we do that is something we'll see in the upcoming video or the next video. So type string, unique true, required true, and what I'll do is I'll also make index true. So we really want this to be a quick search. So index would be true, and then initial password, this is something that you will get from the request body. Required of course is true. Role, like I said, it could be uh, admin, dev, devops, product owner, product manager, etc., whatever roles you have within your team or organization. And again, enum makes sure that when you are creating this record, the user within the database, the roles are something amongst these. So you can always edit this array to your own liking. And status, yeah, you have active and inactive. Sorry, I think I said non-active or not active in the beginning, but it's active and inactive. Now that is important to have the status of the user. You'll know why when we try to delete a user. Security, like I said, this will hold the security questions for the user, and the questions are auto generated. I'll show you how you do that. Then you have the gender, type string, and this is also required. It could be male, female, or unspecified if someone does not want to disclose it. Bio, like I said, you can have anything in the bio. Really doesn't matter. You can have the user write his story, his developer story, his journey, his career story. Really doesn't matter. Created by, this would be auto generated. We'll see how in the next video. Created on, again auto generated, uh, because created on is something where we use the uh, new date feature in JavaScript, and that generates or captures the current timestamp, and then adds to this field. Display picture, again it's an array. We'll see how. Activities, now activities is something that I still haven't worked on, but at the end of this video series we'll work on that, where we'll see how can we make use of this field. For now you won't see this when you create a user. All right, that was it for the user model. Let's close it. And we have already created the user, and you would see all these fields here, the ones that we discussed in the user model. You'll see all of that here, except the display picture, because I'm really not uploading any display picture for the user now. So that would not be here. All right, with that we have created the first user. And if you also remember, in the very first video I said that you can create a user profile. However, there would be one more record created for the same user that will hold the user credentials. Okay, so when we try to authenticate the user, this is not the record that gets called. There's a reason for it. Now this record is exposed by the middleware, where an admin or other users, if authorized, would be able to see the user profile, which is his first name, middle name, last name, phone, email, group, initial password. Of course, even if they see, it's encrypted. So if you see here, uh, we have encrypted the password, and anyhow this is irrelevant once the user has logged in, because this is not the password that is required for authentication or getting the access token. So basically this is exposed by the middleware, and hence we treat this record as a profile and not the one that is used for authenticating the user using the user credentials. So then what is used to authenticate the user? Well, once you have created this user profile, now typically there's a route where the user needs to go and enter this initial password, this init password that we had provided, and enter it with a new password, and then another record gets created for the user where the user has his user ID and the new password, which only the user knows. So in production environment or a real world scenario, how this works is you as an admin of the system hit this route or hit this URI, create the user profile, create this initial password for the user, and hand over this initial password to the user. Say you have a new developer in the team, so you create his profile, create his initial password, hand over this password to the new developer, and then ask him to use this initial password to set up his credentials. Now that or those credentials get set up in a different record, which is not exposed by the um, middleware. So what we are going to do is we are going to set up the other record that we have been talking about, which is setting up the credentials for the user using another route. So if I scroll down right here, it's called create creds. Now this will create the credentials of the user which the user is going to use. So let's do just that. I'm going to go back to my HTTP file, first user. Okay, let me minimize this. Let me comment out this. This is already done. Or also before that, all right, I don't think so. I would require that. Yeah, so I'll comment out this and I'll uncomment this code. So it would be a post request to this URI. Let me minimize this. It would be a post request to HTTP localhost 5000 version 1, which is v1, sorry, services, and then create threads, right? And here you would need to give field called random, sorry, new password. Now this is the field which will create the new password of the user, right? And on Postman, you would do something similar. So it would be, oh, I think I've saved creating the first user. Have I? No, I don't think so. And also let me run this request here on the Postman so that you guys can see one. So it would be create threads, yeah, right there. And in the body of the request, you will need to provide the new password. And let me, okay, I'm sorry, I think I am forgetting something. You would also need to provide the initial password with the user ID. So if I go to services.js and create threads, what does it look for? Okay, here I've hard coded the user ID already, so we really don't have to provide the user ID anywhere here in with the request. That's hard coded. Password is something that we need to provide, so that would be new password, right? And yeah, that would be new password. Status, group, email, phone, ID. Okay, everything would be copied from the user profile, so which is USR0. Now remember again, if you think this is confusing, just don't bother about it. This is not what we will be doing in production environment or real world. This is just to create the very first user on the database so that we can create other users then and uh, us make operations on the database, CRUD operations on the database. This is just to create the very first initial user. That's it. Okay, so all that you have to do is just provide a new password in the request body, and you can give any password you want. I'm just giving the word random, and you need to hit this URI with a post request, and that should be it. Now, if I send this request, and also remember, you have to change the body type to JSON. What that basically does is it adds a header called content type application JSON. That's all it is. Okay, once done, I send this request and we get result. Now of course when you create a user, you won't send this back to the user. What you typically only do is you send a response called user created. That's all. So I'll show you that if I can go there. So if I go to user auth, let me close this. If I go to user auth and then I go to first login, uh, this is the route that would be used in a production environment. So like I said, you create an initial password and hand it over to the user, and once you do, then you set up the credentials of the user, and in the response you typically only send this line here, which is user ID, whatever the user ID is, and setup success. you do not expose any of these fields, right? And then you also give the user a link where the user can get his or her access token, and also the link where the user can set up his or her security questions. Now, now that we have created the credentials, we are going to use this link to get the very first access token. So let me see if I have an HTTP file created to get the access token. Yes, I have. Okay, I already have this set up. Let me minimize this. Let me close other files. Okay. Now, like I said, this middleware has an inbuilt native token-based authentication system where uh, which manages user authentication and authorization. Now, to manage that, we need to get a security token or an access token, and this token is then in turn used to fetch resources from the database or write to the database. So we will only fetch the token, and for that you again need to send a post request to this URI right here: http localhost port 5000 API version 1, which is v1, user auth get token. Okay, so this is the URI that we need to hit with a post request and a body of the request where you give the user ID. So the user that we created had a user ID of USR0. If I can go back here and show you right here, user ID is USR0, and then password. Now password that I had created was a word called random, so I'll keep it as random. Or let me do one more thing, even better. Let me give some other password, let's say a wrong password, and this should not create a token. Instead, you should get a response of 403 forbidden. Okay, with all that done, I will send the request. In Postman, it would be something like this. I'll show you that as well. So I'll just copy this route. Go here. Let me open a new tab. So in Postman, if you're using Postman, this would be the URI. Request type would be post, and then in the body, we'll choose raw, which would be type JSON, and here you need to give your user ID, which would be USR0, and then you'll have your password, and then you give your password, whatever your password here is. You just give your password and then you click on send. I'm going to do this here, so I'll click on send request, and like I said, I'll get 403 forbidden. That is because I'm using a wrong password. This is not the password that we had set up for the user. Now if I give the correct password, which was the word random, and now if I send the request, I should get an access token. So now if I send the request, I get HTTP 201 created, and if I scroll down, here's my access token. So when you hit this route, you will get a response with this object where the key would be access token, followed by the access token or the security token that is generated. Now also remember, this token is valid for 1 hour, but you can always change it. How do we change that? For that, we'll have to dive into the code for a little while, which we'll do in the next video. So for this video, that's all. We have successfully created the initial user. And again, remember, we created the user using a workaround or kind of hack. This is not what we would do uh, from now on. We did this just to make the initial commit to the database. And now that is done and we are able to create access tokens. We will try to mock production scenarios from the next video. So until then, thank you.